The patient on my table had a grade 4 glioblastoma pressing against his brain stem. I had 4 hours. The imaging was on the screen to my left. The surgical team was positioned. The anesthesiologist had already confirmed sedation depth. Everything in that operating room was exactly where it needed to be, moving with the specific efficiency of a team that had done this together enough times to work without unnecessary words. The attending nurse told me the family was in the waiting room. I already knew who they were. Let me tell you how we got here, not the surgery, not the tumor. The part before all of that, the part that started in a dining room in Cincinnati on a Sunday evening in October, 7 years ago, when my parents sat across from me and explained, with genuine kindness and complete confidence, that they would not be funding my medical school. My father Warren delivered it the way he delivered everything, measured, reasonable, constructed to sound like wisdom. Medical school was a significant financial commitment. $280,000 over 4 years, conservatively. The debt load was considerable. The timeline to stable income was long. The risk, relative to other options, was high. He had run the numbers. He had thought about it carefully. He and my mother Judith had discussed it at length. The answer was no. I was 27 years old. I had spent 3 years completing a post-baccalaureate program specifically to qualify for medical school after my undergraduate degree in biology. I had taken the MCAT twice. I had been accepted to 2 programs. I was sitting across from my parents with an enrollment packet on the table between us, and my father was explaining, calmly and with genuine affection, that the numbers did not work. Then he said the thing I have thought about almost every day since. "You're strong enough to figure this out on your own, Mara. That's not a limitation. That's a compliment. Some people need a foundation laid for them. You've never been that person." My mother nodded. She reached across and put her hand on mine. "Caleb needs us right now," she said. "You understand." Caleb was 30 years old and had been developing a health tech startup for 18 months, Neuropath Diagnostics, a software platform built around a diagnostic algorithm designed to assist clinicians in neurological case assessment, processing patient data, imaging results, and symptom patterns to generate risk stratification recommendations. It was, my father explained at a separate dinner 6 months later, an investment in vision. He and my mother were liquidating $280,000 in savings to fund Neuropath's second development phase. I sat at that table and listened to my father describe Caleb's vision with the specific enthusiasm he had never directed at my enrollment packet. And I understood something clearly and permanently that evening. It was not about the money. It was about who they had decided, somewhere along the way, was worth believing in. I drove back to my apartment in Columbus that night and sat at my kitchen table with my enrollment packet and my laptop and a legal pad. And I did the math that my father had decided not to do on my behalf. Federal loans, $310,000 over 4 years with current interest rates. Monthly payment post-graduation, assuming a standard repayment plan and a neurosurgery attending salary in a mid-tier market, manageable. Difficult, but manageable. I deferred my enrollment twice. The first year because I could not cover living costs, while servicing my undergraduate debt simultaneously. The second year because the hospital where I was working as a medical scribe offered to promote me to a research coordinator position that paid enough to build a real buffer. I worked 3 jobs during the deferral period, research coordinator during the day, weekend shifts at an urgent care clinic as a phlebotomy technician, Tuesday and Thursday evenings tutoring pre-med students at the university library. I did not tell my parents about the 3 jobs because they did not ask about my situation with any specificity. Our phone calls during those 2 years were warm and general. "How are you doing?" "Fine. How is work?" "Good." They mentioned Caleb's progress regularly. The platform was in beta testing. The early feedback was promising. They had connected him with an angel investor through a family friend. The second round of family investment came at Christmas of the second deferral year. My parents had remortgaged the family home. $90,000, pulled from the equity they had spent 23 years building. Redirected into Neuropath's operating costs after the first full year of losses, had depleted the initial investment faster than projected. My father mentioned it briefly, between dinner and dessert, as though it were a reasonable and unremarkable decision. "We believe in what he's building," he said. I stayed for 2 hours after dinner and then drove back to Columbus. I remember that drive clearly, not because of the money. Because of something Caleb had said at dinner when my father asked him to explain the algorithm's current development stage. Caleb had walked us through the neurological assessment logic, the data inputs, the weighting system, the risk stratification output. He was proud of it. He described it with the confidence of someone who had been told consistently that his vision was worth believing in. I listened to the technical description and noticed something. The algorithm's weighting system undervalued bleeding risk indicators in high-pressure cranial cases. The inputs were sound. The output structure was reasonable. But the specific weighting applied to intracranial pressure variables in acute presentations was too low by a margin that would not be visible in standard low-complexity cases and would become critically significant in exactly the cases where the algorithm's recommendation would matter most. I was 29 years old and 18 months away from starting medical school. I did not say anything, not because I wanted the algorithm to fail, because nobody had asked me. Because the pattern of that family, around that table, had been established clearly enough that I understood my observations about Caleb's work were not part of the evening's agenda. I filed it in the back of my mind and drove home. I started medical school in the fall. The loans cleared. The first year was the hardest financially. There were 3 months during the first winter where I was eating the same 4 meals on rotation and keeping the heat at 61 degrees to manage the utility bill. I did not call home during those months, not from pride. From a decision I had made clearly, I had chosen this path with full knowledge of what it cost, and managing that cost was mine to do. I did it. Year by year, rotation by rotation, examination by examination, I moved through the program with the specific focus of someone who has no margin for distraction. I matched into neurosurgery for my residency, a brutally competitive specialty that accepted 8% of applicants that cycle. My program director told me during my match interview that she had rarely seen a candidate with my combination of technical precision and clinical composure. I thought about my father's dining room when she said that. The Neuropath story reached me through a medical journal during my 3rd residency year, not through my family. Through a published case, review examining diagnostic algorithm failures in neurological emergency settings. The article documented 3 cases at partner hospitals where Neuropath's risk stratification output had contributed to delayed intervention decisions in acute high-pressure cranial presentations. 2 patients had experienced significant complications. 1 had not survived. The federal investigation had opened 4 months earlier. I read the technical analysis in the case review. The flaw was exactly where I had seen it at that Christmas dinner 4 years ago. The intracranial pressure weighting. Undervalued by a margin that was invisible in low-complexity cases and critical in the cases that mattered most. I sat with that journal for a long time, not with satisfaction. With the specific grief of seeing something preventable that was not prevented. 3 patients, 1 of them gone. A flaw that had existed in the algorithm's logic from the beginning, visible to anyone with the right training who had been asked to look. Nobody had asked. Neuropath collapsed within 4 months of the investigation opening. The legal exposure was significant. The angel investor withdrew. The platform was taken offline. Caleb lost everything he had built over 5 years. My parents lost $280,000 in liquidated savings and $90,000 in home equity. $370,000 total. gone. I completed my residency and accepted a position at a Level 1 trauma center in Chicago. Complex cranial cases, high-volume neurological emergency work, a surgical team with a reputation that had taken 30 years to build. I was the youngest attending neurosurgeon on staff by 4 years. My parents had not called in 14 months. I had not called them either, not from bitterness. From the same clarity I had been operating from since that dining room in Cincinnati 7 years earlier. We had made our respective decisions. Those decisions had produced their respective outcomes. I did not know what to do with the distance between us, and I had too much work in front of me to spend significant time trying to figure it out. Then my phone rang on a Tuesday evening in February. The number was my parents' home line. My mother's voice was not the voice she used for regular calls. It was compressed and specific in the way voices get when the situation has already moved past the point where composure is available. Caleb had collapsed at home that afternoon. Acute onset, severe headache, vision disturbance, loss of coordination. Emergency transport. Initial imaging at the receiving hospital had shown a mass with brain stem involvement. They were transferring him to my hospital. She said the name of my hospital. I was already at the hospital when the transfer arrived. I reviewed the imaging before I went to the waiting room. Grade 4 glioblastoma. Brain stem proximity significant but operable with the correct approach. The surgical window was narrow, and the case was complex in the specific ways that made it exactly the kind of case my program director had matched me into neurosurgery to handle. I changed into surgical scrubs. I walked through the waiting room doors. My mother saw me first. She was standing near the far wall with her coat still on, her hands together in front of her. And she looked at me in scrubs with my hospital badge and my surgical cap in my hand, and her face did something I had not seen it do before. My father said my name once. I looked at them both. I said one sentence. Then I turned and walked back through the doors to prepare for surgery. The surgery took 4 hours and 11 minutes. I will not walk you through the technical details because they are not the point. The point is that I did my job completely and without any consideration other than the one that belongs in an operating room. The patient on the table, the imaging on the screen, the team beside me. The work. Caleb survived. The tumor was resected with clear margins. Brain stem function was preserved. Recovery would be long and the follow-up protocol was significant. But he was alive, and his prognosis was better than the initial imaging had suggested it might be. I met with my parents in the family consultation room at 7:40 in the evening. My father stood when I entered. My mother reached for my hand, and I let her take it for a moment. I told them what the surgery had found, what we had done, what the recovery timeline looked like, what they needed to monitor and discuss with the oncology team in the coming weeks. I answered their questions completely and clearly. When the medical information was covered, my father looked at me for a long time. "How did you get here?" he said. "How did you become this without? How did this happen?" I looked at my father, Warren Ellison, 64 years old, the man who had run the numbers on my enrollment packet and found them wanting, who had described his decision not to invest in me as a compliment. I told him exactly how it happened. The federal loans, the 3 jobs during the deferral years, the 61-degree apartment in the first winter of medical school, the 4 meals on rotation, the match into a specialty that accepted 8% of applicants, the 14-hour days of residency, the position at this hospital, earned through a record built entirely from work I had done without a single dollar of family investment. I gave him the numbers the way he had always given me numbers, measured, complete, without editorializing. Then I said the sentence I had said in the waiting room 4 hours earlier. "You told me I was strong enough to survive without your investment. You were right. I just didn't know yet that surviving without it would make me the only person qualified to save him." My father did not respond immediately. My mother was crying quietly. I stood up and told them someone from the nursing team would check in within the hour. and that Caleb's oncologist would be available for a full consultation in the morning. Then I went back to work. There are 3 more patients on the schedule tomorrow. A follow-up imaging review for a post-op cranial case from last week. A new consult from the neurology department that arrived this afternoon. The administrative work that accumulates faster than it can be processed at a hospital this size. I am not telling you this story because of what happened in that waiting room or that consultation room. I am telling you because of what happened in the 10 years between that dining room in Cincinnati and this hospital in Chicago. The specific texture of building something completely on your own. Without the foundation, without the investment, without anyone deciding that your vision was worth believing in, it costs things that do not have clean numbers attached to them. The cold apartment. The missed moments. The phone calls you do not make because you have decided that managing your own situation is yours to do. But it builds something too. Something that belongs to you in a way that nothing funded by someone else's belief ever entirely can. My father said I was strong enough to survive without their support. He meant it as a reason to withhold something. It turned out to be the most accurate thing he ever said about me. If you have ever been handed independence instead of support, if you have ever been called strong as a way of being passed over, and you built something real with it anyway, you already understand what this cost, and you already know it was worth it.